Welcome to Health System CIO's HIMSS Conference preview interview with Keith Duemling, Senior Director of Cybersecurity Technology Protection with the Cleveland Clinic. I'm Anthony Guerra, Founder and Editor-in-Chief. Keith, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks. Pleasure to be here.
All right, very good, Keith. So why don't we start off, just give me the overview of your organization and your role.
Sure. So, as you're probably aware, the Cleveland Clinic is a very large healthcare system throughout the United States, and we also have operations in Europe and Abu Dhabi as well. My role specifically is leading the design, development, and operations of a number of our cyber platforms that are necessary to protect our entire global healthcare platform, throughout the world. So, definitely challenging times as healthcare and cybersecurity are not new acquaintances for each other, but the intensity has only increased in the last couple of years.
Excellent. Thank you, Keith. All right, so I'm speaking to people who are going to be speaking at the HIMSS conference to give our readers a little idea of what's going to be going on there. So I know you're going to be speaking. You want to tell me a little bit about the panel you're going to be, or the talk you're going to be giving, sort of the genesis, why you decided to focus on this particular topic area.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were thinking about the HIMSS conference and different content, we had this conversation with the Mayo Clinic about some of our shared challenges with securing medical devices, different approaches, different techniques for driving up the maturity, kind of lessons from the trenches, what worked well, what didn't work well, and trying to figure out how we could share that with the audience and get their input. So I mean, what we're going to put together is a panel that's going to really cover those things. Bring out the genesis of our programs, how they evolved, where we see the future, and share some of those things so that hopefully others can learn and maybe give us some tips and tricks from what they've seen, so we can all leverage it together. Some people are solving it with technology, some people are solving it with process, and then there's everybody else who's doing it with a combination of those things somewhere in between those two ends of the spectrum.
Right, and it's usually that. It's usually technology, process, change management. Um, it's a lot of the political stuff, so that's usually what comes up. Let's talk about the medical devices in your overall cyber cybersecurity approach. Um, there's a lot of competing priorities in cybersecurity, right? And we have to. And I did an interview the other day. Um, with an individual, and his sort of messaging was, you have to get the data, figure out where the attacks are coming from, and then you want to deploy your resources and your cyber defenses in terms of where you're focusing on that. What are your thoughts on that kind of a concept? That his argument was, nobody has enough resources to put the gold standard everywhere, so you got to figure out where they come in, and then we need to put the majority of our resources in those areas. What are your thoughts on that? And then when you talk about medical devices in that context.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a spot on observation. The reality is there's limited resources. So you have to prioritize where you're going to focus your attention. I think with medical devices, there's that added complexity of the fact of what they're doing, the role that they're playing in healthcare delivery. They're not just being used for inputting information, making decisions. I mean, some of these devices are actually administering the care directly to patients or monitoring them. So there's another component, which is, the life safety aspect of these devices. So it's not just potentially a violation of confidentiality and integrity, but it's that availability and again, the life safety aspect of that has to be factored in. So you may have a system that doesn't have a lot of data, but it has an incredible level of importance to patient safety that you have to factor that dynamic in as well. So I think that's forcing us as an industry to kind of add that as a decision-making factor when we try and position these limited resources and how we tackle medical device security.
So when I think of medical devices, there's sort of two concerns that come to mind. One would be that and I think this is rare if we've even seen it. One is that the bad actor is targeting that device with the goal of manipulating that device, perhaps then threatening the organization that, hey, we've got control of your devices or whatever, we're going to change the settings. Or somebody even said, we changed a setting on one of your devices. We're not going to tell you which one it is. So that's sort of scenario one where they're going to mess with the actual device to cause some harm and get some money somehow. The other one is that it's simply an entry point into the network, meaning they're just using it to get in and then they're going to do other things. They don't really want to mess with the device per se. Does that make sense? Those two kind of things? Just give me your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think it does make sense. I mean, I think we've not seen historically a lot of direct attacks on medical devices as the goal, but to your point, as an entry point. I do think another concept is that, medical devices often exist in the environment with other devices that might be the entry point, might be the target. So they may be damaged as kind of collateral damage in the incursion, and that process may be disruptive to their operations. So there's something to be said for they may be a bystander to the event and still suffer, depending on what it is and what its complexity and broadness happens to be.
Right. And working with biomed is another big thing, right? The relationship between biomed that sort of manages the devices from a clinical point of view and cybersecurity, that always seems to be a intricate area where I think it can differ a lot from organization to organization. Those, the structure on paper, who reports to whom, how that's going to be handled. And that seems like if you're going to be successful in this area, that's really got to be figured out. Doesn't have to be the same way everywhere. Again, my understanding from my conversations doesn't have to be the exact same everywhere, but that's certainly got to be figured out.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the structure, to your point, can look different between different organizations, and it will for a lot of different reasons. But the relationship and the partnership is really key to putting together an effective protection program that allows the assets to be protected, but also still, achieving the core reason that they exist in the first place. And without that relationship, I think you're going to struggle, and a program is going to really have difficulties reaching, advanced states of maturity, because you have two forces that are moving in different directions when you really need them to be moving in sync with each other.
All right, very good. Let's talk a little bit about your goals for the show. So, you're speaking in a session.
Yep.
Do you kind of, you want to make the most of your time? I don't know if you're doing kind of an in and out thing or you're going to spend some time there. Do you figure, all right, I'm gonna take a look at the educational agenda. I might hit a session or two. Do you make, sort of meetings with colleagues for coffee? Do you plan on hitting the exhibit floor? And then, one of the classic issues is you don't want to get attacked, right? I mean, this is a classic thing. You're one of the people that everybody wants to talk to. You're a buyer, potentially, right? So it can make the shows a little challenging. It can make the exhibit hall a little intimidating. Some people want to hide their badge because they just want to look around without being attacked. So anyway, your thoughts on your overall goals for the show, what you're going to try and do there.
Well, I think you unfortunately let go one of the secrets that I was going to use. Hiding my badge is definitely something I had planned on employing. So I'll have to come up with some another technique. But I intend to do all the above. I'm going to spend a good amount of time at the conference, maybe not the entirety of it, but there's a lot of high quality educational sessions that I want to attend. Some key strategic vendors who we want to talk with and help understand their solutions and how they're changing. And a number of peers who I'm looking to catch up with as well. So, really all the above is what I'm going for. And of course, dodging some of the things that, maybe, not the best use of the time and whatnot. But given what we've gone through as an industry with COVID, I'm glad to have these challenges compared to what we were, going through. I'm glad to be able to get back in person with people and talk and, sit down in a room and try and solution some of these things, and really hear about also the innovation that's come out of COVID, that's come out of all these challenges. I mean, it's reinvigorated a lot of these conferences because we're not just talking about what was and what is, but what could be. And so that's what really has me excited and willing to say, well, there's all those positives and there's a couple negatives, but the positives definitely outweigh the negatives.
So you mentioned meeting with strategic vendors. Are these existing vendors, potential vendors, or both?
Both, I would say. We've
Okay, and
seen
you set those up ahead of time.
usually the vast majority, but there's always some ad hoc ones that, whether it's something catches your eye or, there's a number of individuals from my organization going, and sometimes you get that, text message, hey, yeah, I got to come over here and check this out. This is something that we didn't know about that might help us. So there's a lot of that happens as well.
Yeah, and there's the interesting dynamic of when you maybe actually want to actually talk to someone at a booth, which is like the dream, right? It's everybody's dream there that something like that would happen, and they don't have, or they have somebody super junior, or somebody who can't really engage with you. Have you seen that where like I'd like to have a conversation, but uh, or not so much?
I have seen that. I think there are other conferences where that really seems to happen. I'm not going to name names, but
Yeah.
I think that HIMSS is one where, the solution providers, they put their best foot forward, and they have people who really have the depth of understanding. I mean, sure, there's some that are, that maybe don't, but then there's also something to be said for some of the smaller vendors have really, or solution providers, sorry, I should use the right term, have, some really innovative and new products, and they're kind of on the peripheral sections. And if you spend some time in those areas, you really see, some unique things. So again, it's one of those, the risk is worth it because you find some gems that are hiding in plain sight.
So, what would your message be to sales folks about what they really should avoid doing? I mean, is you see sometimes maybe an over aggressiveness, um, just a lack of willingness to let you sort of okay, we've had a little talk, and I'll follow up if I'm interested. Now I'm going to go. I don't know. Does that happen a lot where you sort of almost become uncomfortable? And we don't want people to do that. So if we can put information out there that says, hey, you can do this, but don't do this. That might be helpful.
Yeah, I think, a couple things come to mind. Obviously, there's the aggressiveness both in person and online. When you're chasing after someone, whether it's in person or, there's the 15 messages in LinkedIn that you haven't responded to a single one, but they are consistently coming. You know, there has to be some balance between, trying to get the message out, and knowing when you just need to kind of step back a little bit. And of course, I think you hit on it earlier. There's that knowing the product and knowing the value and being able to articulate the value, to, to someone who's seeking a solution out there. And understanding that rarely is there one product that's going to solve all the problems. So talk to me about how you can help me solve problems, but also integrate with other capabilities that will help me solve problems or other functions. And that's to me what I can build a platform and build a strategy around, as opposed to just, niche solutions that, unless they're perfect, they're not going to help me because they don't talk with anything else.
Right, right. So here would be a couple of red flags that I've heard before. One is if you ask somebody to tell me about your what you guys do, and it doesn't even make sense, or it's not clear. It's too much, and you're like, no, no, I don't even, and I've talked to people and they say, yeah, that's our problem is we
Right.
do too much. They'll tell you in confidence, yeah, I can't even explain it, or the
Hmm.
menu's too big. So you have to be able to talk about what you do. It's got to be compelling and narrow enough that it makes sense, right? It's got to make sense. I mean, I'm sure you've heard pitches that you go, well, that's kind of a lot of stuff. That sounds and disjointed, and
Yep.
it just gives you a bad vibe.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean,
Okay.
there's solution providers out there that you don't understand what their strategy is. It feels like they're just playing, the different markets for, cast in the largest net to see, how many they can catch without it really, making sense. And I think the best ones are where they can bring their multiple products together to solve complex situations, but then also know this is a space we don't want to play in. but we know somebody else who's really great at it. So let's build an integration. And then they can approach, companies like ours and say, here's how we can solve your problems, integrating with some of your existing technology and capabilities.
Right, right. And do you think the statement that we have no competitors is usually a red flag?
Usually, it either means you're that far out on the fringe that you don't know, or you haven't done what I would consider a, strong enough market analysis to really know maybe what your product is and what some of the competing solutions are. So yeah, that's usually a red flag. And of course, leading off with the free item that you can get if you spend 15 minutes in the booth is, not something that's of interest to me. I'm not really interested in walking away with a collection of drones or anything else like that. So,
It's usually not even that good. It's usually not a drone. It's
well, it changes throughout the year. So yeah, but
I used to find it comical, and I hope I don't offend any sponsors that are doing this at the show, but it wasn't even what you get some sort of bingo card, and it would have a whole bunch of vendors on it. You had to go to all the vendor booths, and then you come back somewhere with your bingo card, and you get some. And I used to say to myself, I don't understand these folks that you're trying to get run around with these bingo cards. Their time is so valuable. And by the way, they're making a few bucks on their paycheck. So it's not like they need a free
right.
cup of coffee. They have enough money that this is not going to sway them. And their time is more important than anything. And you want them to run around. I just found it to be silly.
Yeah, I mean it is counterproductive. So I don't normally participate in that. I mean, to your point, my time is limited, but you know, more on a serious note, my organization and our patients really expect us when we're there to be putting to be laser focused on what our mission is. And, anything that really pulls me in a direction off of that is not something that I'm going to be able to get behind. And I know that's a sentiment across all of our leadership at the Cleveland Clinic. We're focused, whether we're here, whether we're at a conference, on our patients all the time.
Do you come back and sort of have meetings with other folks and sort of have any kind of, here's like sort of a specific here's what I saw? Or is it only if you've got something to share? Or is there any kind of focused kind of post-event debriefing?
It's a combination, and debriefing is how we approach it. There's a general, we share notes on where the industry is going based on what we've observed, but then there's things that clearly we have an interest in, and then we'll dig in on those and figure out what our strategy is going forward. So there's no shortages of people at the clinic who are interested in learning. So we bring back a lot of stuff with us to share with other people.
And so there is that element. I mean, between HIMSS and Vive, you might have two times a year when sort of a large percentage of vendors are in the same place and you kind of walk around and see what's up. So they are fairly, unique opportunities to do some window shopping, right?
Yep.
All
Yeah.
right. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we're in an interesting place with the fact that, healthcare has a number of emerging conferences that are, growing in strength. And, it's now a choice of between HIMSS and Vive and several others, including, regional events. So, what once was a very restricted, set of choices, the menu has increased in size.
And I'm sure you get invited to all kinds of things. Besides these shows, you get invited to little regional conferences and dinners and tons of stuff. But again, it comes down to your time, right? I mean,
Yep.
every decision is an individual decision. Is this compelling? Is this have some significant brand behind it that I trust in terms of the organizers? Am I comfortable? Do I have the time? And is this where I want to spend my time? So,
Yep.
yeah. So it's
All
it's
critical
not
factors.
it's a lot. I mean, there's
Yep.
no shortage of invitations, right?
That is an understatement. Yes.
That's those. That's why you get those 15 pings on LinkedIn,
Yep.
right? Stay
And
friendly. They got to stay friendly. Now, nobody's saying you should do 15 pings, but if you're going to do 15 pings, stay friendly because we see some of them, they get a little, where are you? Why aren't you
yeah,
responding?
they get a little aggressive, try and, put some shaming in there, make you feel guilty, is it me that you hold up the signs with the picture and like, okay. So,
Yeah.
and then you
Yeah.
scroll back up and there's, hippo that's misspelled or, hello, and then there's where there's clearly a mail merge and it didn't go right. So I mean,
Oh, well, in the email, when you see the formatting differences,
right.
the font
That's
different,
another
yeah,
red flag.
yeah,
So
yeah. So absolutely, stay friendly, right, folks? If
yep.
you're going to be persistent, stay friendly and don't be too aggressive. Put a little time in between those pings.
And stay authentic as well.
Stay authentic. Stay
Yep.
authentic. Very good. All right, Keith, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for your time.